It's always a possibility. I'm not always right. I'm just frequently right. I'm sure all of us know by now, but there is a new book coming to the Hunger Games series. It is yet another prequel featuring our favorite character, Haymitch Abernathy. And with the renewed buzz around our beloved franchise, there is also a revisiting of a tale as old as time. That being that The Hunger Games is a direct copy from a different novel titled Battle Royale. Battle Royale, which was published in 1999, is another dystopian novel. This book is credited as being the origin of this genre, later inspiring books like The Hunger Games, The Maze Runner, and others. But ever since people brought up the similarities between these two books, Suzanne Collins has vehemently denied knowing about Battle Royale's existence. She never read the book, she never heard about the book, and she only found out about it after she turned in her initial manuscript for The Hunger Games. And after I covered the similarities between Powerless and Red Queen, I thought it was only fitting that I now cover Battle Royale and The Hunger Games. So, without further ado, hello, welcome back. It is a new day, a new sleigh, and a new video where I have something to say, and today we're going to be discussing if The Hunger Games is actually a ripoff of Battle Royale. Now, before we start, I do have to say that this book, Battle Royale, was originally published in Japanese, so I read the translated version. And with any kind of translated text, you are bound to lose some of the meaning. In a perfect scenario, I would be 100% fluent in Japanese and English, so that way I can make these comparisons with the utmost accuracy, but unfortunately, I have to go off of the translated version. And my other disclaimer is that I love The Hunger Games. I am a little bit biased towards it just because it was my favorite book growing up and it is still one of my favorite series of all time. So I was already a little bit biased once I started these books, but I can assure you that in my analysis, in my read of both of these books, I tried to push that aside as much as I could to focus on the pure facts and evidence that both these books lay out. Before I get too far into this video, let me just give a brief summary of both books. In Battle Royale, our main character is Shuya Nanahara. He is a third-year student, about 15 years old, and one day he is going on a class trip, only to find out that the trip is actually taking them to an island where they will participate in an experiment. Shuya and his classmates are living in the Republic of Greater East Asia. This is a dystopian totalitarian government in which they have to participate in this experiment. It is a total of 42 students that have to fight to the death until there is only one person left standing. And in The Hunger Games, it is very similar. We all know what happens. We follow our main character, Katniss Everdeen, as she volunteers for her sister to take place in a battle to the death called The Hunger Games. But just in general, from that premise, it does sound very similar. But as we go on, and as I explain the similarities and differences, we'll see that the ending, the way that these two stories go, is very different. The themes that are explored, the certain plot points, it's all very unique, I would argue. So when I originally looked up, The Hunger Games supposedly copying Battle Royale, I saw that apparently the conversation was sparked by Quentin Tarantino, who in an interview said that The Hunger Games was a blatant ripoff of Battle Royale. Now, he was going off of the movie franchises, but what a wild thing to say on the record and on television. I read through some of the articles going through like the similarities, quote unquote, and granted, I have not watched Battle Royale, the movie. I have only read the book, but even going through the list of evidence that people provided saying that the Hunger Games movie was a ripoff, oh my God, it was a stretch. Someone genuinely put as a point, as some evidence that it was copied, is that the protagonists of both movies are a boy and a girl. You know how fucking generic that is? Why would you include that in your list of evidence? That's nothing. That's grasping at straws. Now, they did provide some other evidence, but I'm just like, why would you add that to the list? Regardless, it was a weak argument. Now, when you read the books, there is a slightly stronger argument to be made about the similarities between these two books, which I will go into now. First, it seems like the biggest piece of evidence to suggest that The Hunger Games is a copy is because of the format, specifically the Battle Royale. So, of course, that term is coined from the original book, Battle Royale. I'm going to say that Battle Royale really inspired this pop culture moment. In the same way that the Hunger Games is often credited with inspiring, or rather fanning the flames so that certain books could rise in popularity. Things like The Selection, The Maze Runner, Divergent, all those dystopian teen novels. The publication of the Hunger Games was what really kind of set the stage for those books to succeed. And it was the exact same with Battle Royale. So when most people are saying that the Hunger Games is a copy, is because of this specific format. Having kids in an arena where they fight to the death is what a lot of people would argue very unique to Battle Royale, which, yes, it is incredibly unique to that story. But my argument, and what some people might not agree with me, is that I don't think that you can copy the format. A fight to the death is not a unique concept. The way that it was used in Battle Royale is entirely its own. It is incredibly unique, but it is something that has existed for a long time. You could even argue it's similar to free-for-alls, or even like bracket tiered fighting. Even gladiator deaths, you can say, all contribute to this idea of a fight to the death. So I don't think any one person can claim ownership of that format. To me, it's very similar if someone tried to say like, oh, I invented sci-fi, therefore no one can publish under this genre. It's just too broad. Or, being more specific, with dystopian novels. You can't trace who created the dystopian novel. And every novel in that genre will have similarities, usually with a tyrannical government, people trying to rebel against it, injustice, inequality, and so many other things that go into the genre that make it dystopian. You will find those similarities across any book in that genre. It does not mean that they copy each other. So I don't think this style of battle can be entirely credited to one person. I don't think that the author of Battle Royale, Kashun Takami, can claim that this is originally his. However, with that being said, I think that he could claim ownership of the way that he used it. If another book were to have this fight to the death, have all these people in one space and only one winner comes out, we can't call those two books the same. But if this book also had all its participants on an island, all 15 years of age, and all randomly chosen to fight in this battle, then there is an argument to be had about how similar they are and if it is an actual copy. Of course, The Hunger Games and Battle Royale both use this battle format where you have a number of kids go into an arena and only one can come out. That in and of itself, I don't think is enough basis to say that it is a copy. All that to say, we can't claim that The Hunger Games copied Battle Royale just because of the similar battle format. However, we can claim it was a copy if certain details of the battle are similar enough, which is what I will be going into now. First on my list, the participants of both games are young adults. In The Hunger Games, the participants, the tributes, are between the ages of 12 and 18. In Battle Royale, all the participants are 15 years of age. Next similarity is that they're both chosen at random. In The Hunger Games, of course, you have the reaping ceremony. Everyone's names go into a pot and you just pick one. In Battle Royale, it's chosen by a computer system, and that choosing process is not broadcasted. It is very much you are randomly selected with your entire class to participate in these games. Another similarity is that the games, or the experiment for Battle Royale, takes place every single year. Then, of course, we have a monetary prize for the winner. In The Hunger Games, it is not only the victor, but also their entire district that does get some kind of benefit if you win the games. And you're also set up in a house in the victor's village. In Battle Royale, they call it a pension. Basically, the government will continue to pay you out for the rest of your life. The only other benefit, which I thought was really funny, is that the dictator will sign a photo card of himself and give it to you. I'm not kidding. It's a photo card. Another similarity is that the participants in the games are punished when no deaths occur. Now, this is a little bit of a stretch, and I am including the similarities that are very like bare minimum just for the sake of the argument. In The Hunger Games, the participants, the tributes, aren't directly punished, we'll say, if no one dies. It's more so alluded to by the characters that the game makers want action. So if no one dies within a day, they will manufacture certain events to happen. In the Hunger Games, there is a specific event where the game makers light up the arena and just like put the whole forest on fire, and the whole purpose of that is to push the tributes together and manufacture this confrontation. But it's different in Battle Royale. In this book, they are directly punished if no one dies. The instructor will call him the game maker of this experiment. His name is Sakamochi, and he tells them that if no one dies in a 24-hour period, they will kill all the participants and no one wins. So this is a more explicit kind of punishment, whereas in the Hunger Games, it's more discouraged if no action happens. Next similarity is that the deaths are announced to the living participants in the game. In the Hunger Games, you have the iconic sound of the cannon going off, and at the end of every night, they will project the faces of the dead tributes into the sky for everyone to see. In Battle Royale, Sakamochi will make announcements every 6 hours to let them know who has died. Then we have all the participants have trackers on them. In the Hunger Games, these trackers are injected into the arms of the participants to make sure that they can accurately count how many people died, who died, and, just keep track of everyone. In Battle Royale, these trackers take the form of collars around their necks. These collars also act as, kind of like a defense mechanism. They're programmed to explode with a command from Sakamochi. Now, they can explode for a number of reasons. One of those reasons being if someone is caught in what's called a forbidden zone. Throughout the game, Sakamochi will announce certain areas of their island that they cannot go to make sure that they're not just hiding in place and, keep it interesting in a really grotesque way. So if a student is caught in a forbidden zone after a certain time, their collar will explode. Another reason that they might explode is if no one dies within the first 24 hours. And as we find out later in the book, they are also equipped with microphones so that Sakamochi and the other government officials can keep tabs on what they're doing. Okay, but you see what I mean? That is a similarity, technically, because they both have trackers, but they're used in such different ways. The microphone aspect of the collar is so crucial to the plot in Battle Royale, and there is no such device in the trackers in the Hunger Games. I'm sorry, I just started this video. I can't be crashing out like this. Let me just continue. The next similarity is that the participants are punished for starting early. In the Hunger Games, the tributes are punished if they try to start the games a little bit early. That being if they're caught fighting with each other before the games, if they step off their little starting plates before the gong goes off. But in Battle Royale, it is a little bit different. All the students start in a classroom as Sakamochi explains the rules of the games, like how everything will go. And he sees that one girl is trying to whisper to one of the classmates, presumably to make a plan. He pulls out his gun and shoots her, and he's like, you can't be planning before everyone else has a chance to start the game. So that form of punishment is very much subjective, and it just depends on Sakamochi as a character, whereas in the Hunger Games, it's very much built into the rules. The next similarity is that the resources in the game become more scarce as the game progresses. In the Hunger Games, it's because the game makers are directly manipulating the arena. And in Battle Royale, it is very similar, where Sakamochi is making certain areas forbidden, and these areas might include things like a medical clinic or homes or just other hiding places. And as an homage to that article that I read, another similarity is that the protagonists are a boy and a girl. I'm trying to be as forgiving as possible to this argument, so anything that can potentially fly as a similarity, I have it on this list. In the Hunger Games, our protagonists are Katniss and Peeta. In Battle Royale, our protagonists are Shuya Nanahara and Nariko Nakagawa. I remembered their names off the top of my head. I'm so proud of myself. Listen, 42 characters is a lot of people to keep track of, and especially in my defense, there is another Nakagawa in the book. Granted, she only shows up for like one chapter before she dies, unfortunately. But, I'm going to give myself a pat on the back, even though it is the bare minimum that I remember these characters' names. The main pair in both books also receive advice from someone who already won their games. In the Hunger Games, of course, we have their mentor, Haymitch Abernathy. In Battle Royale, it's a little different because it isn't revealed until later into the story. Our two main characters, Shuya and Nariko Noriko end up teaming up with this third student. His name is Shogo Kawada. Shogo was a transfer student in their class, and he was seen as kind of like a thug character. He just like kept to himself. No one really like trusted him because he was a transfer. At the beginning of the story, he's just very like standoffish, but he ends up saving Shuya from almost getting shot, and they team up, and he is very prepared for the games. Like, he already hit up a medical clinic, he got a lot of supplies, he was ready to go. And it comes to light that the reason that he was so prepared and he knew what to do was because he actually participated in the games last year. So he won his games and he was transferred to another school, which is another significant difference between the Hunger Games and Battle Royale, because the victors aren't like paraded around for the rest of their lives. They kind of lay low, so to say. They just kind of go back to their regular day-to-day lives, now receiving a pension from the government. So Shogo was transferred to their school, which just happened to get picked for the games this year. So it was very much by random chance. They didn't do it on purpose, supposedly. Now, more similarities in kind of the world building, we have that both books have a government that rule with an iron fist. In both The Hunger Games and Battle Royale, we have the characters that are very against the ruling of their government, but they can't do anything to speak out against it. The government in Battle Royale is a bit more direct when dealing with any kind of rebellion. Any character that is mentioned in this book to have said anything or done anything that remotely resembles a rebellion has been killed. Whereas in the Hunger Games, I think what really restricts the Capitol from doing stuff like that is PR. The way that the Capitol is viewed is very important and everything is very calculated. So anything done against the districts is also very calculated. You're not going to see these like gory displays, at least not until much later in the book. And I would argue even later in the series. Another similarity, this one was very exact, which I will say was interesting and a little weird that it was the same for both books, is that the country is 75 years old. In the Hunger Games, they're celebrating the 74th and 75th annual Hunger Games, meaning that Pan Am is only 75 years old. In Battle Royale, they tell us that Greater East Asia is only 75 years old. That one is a little bit too exact to feel like a coincidence, but it's very minor, I will say. But in conjunction with some of the other similarities, I could see why it strengthens the argument that the Hunger Games copied off Battle Royale. The next similarity is that the elites place bets on the outcome of the games. Another similarity that is a little too exact is that the love interest is injured in the leg specifically. In the Hunger Games, Peta is injured by Kato, who slashes his leg with a sword. And in Battle Royale, Noriko is injured at the very start of the game, arguably before it really starts, when they are in the classroom still getting the rundown of the rules and how everything is going to go. Shuya's best friend, Yoshitoki, I'm not going to go into the details because it makes me sad and it's a little graphic, but essentially he gets really mad. Sakamochi reveals something very heinous that he did to someone that Yoshitoki loved, and he gets up and threatens to kill him. So in retaliation, Sakamochi kills him. Both Noriko and Shuya are up in arms and they both get up from their seats. Noriko tries to comfort Yoshitoki as he is dying, and as a result, when she gets up from her seat, Sakamochi ends up shooting her in the leg. So she is injured very early on, and similarly in both books, the love interest is nurtured back to health by the main character. And focusing on our main duos for both books, the main character is completely unaware of the love interest's feelings for them. Katniss goes through a character arc throughout this book about whether or not she believes Peta's feelings for her are real. In Battle Royale, Shuya goes through a similar internal crisis, but that's because his best friend Yoshitoki, the person that dies at the beginning, revealed to him that he had a crush on Noriko. Noriko actually has a crush on Shuya, and she has had that crush for a very long time, predating the start of the book. But Shuya is completely unaware of this, and anytime he even thinks about her in a romantic way, he just feels so guilty about his friend Yoshitoki. So he goes through a similar conflict conflict and him coming to terms and allowing himself to feel that way about Noriko is very crucial to the book as well. And similarly, both main characters don't really believe that they're super popular. Like throughout the book, both Haymitch and Peeta are saying like Katniss has no idea the effect that she has on people. She has no idea that she's really pretty and boys like her. And it's the same thing in Battle Royale with Shuya, where we get perspectives from multiple girls throughout the class, and so many of them are like, oh my god, I actually have always had a crush on Shuya Nanahara, and he just has no idea. And even Shogo is like, you know you're popular, right? And he's like, no, I'm not. What are you talking about? Another similarity is that both main characters have a special skill that gives them an advantage in the arena. With Katniss, it's very practical. She knows archery, she knows how to hunt, she knows how to shoot, and that greatly helps her in the games. For Shuya's, it's a little bit unconventional. He tells us that when he was younger, he used to be a shortstop in Little League, but his experience as a shortstop and being a pretty good athlete gave him the edge in these games. He's able to run fast. There's even a scene where someone throws a grenade at him, and because he's like really familiar with baseball, he saw the grenade before anyone else. He grabs it as it's hurling towards them and chucks it back before it explodes. I'm not gonna lie, I'm really partial to the Hunger Games, but that was arguably cooler. What do you mean? You snatch a grenade out of the sky and throw it back before it exploded. I really did like that inclusion in Battle Royale. This next similarity is a little bit more in depth, but I did want to talk about it because I think it speaks to the greater message of both books, and that is the illusion of freedom. It is very much in the subtext of the Hunger Games, and it's a little bit more front and center in Battle Royale. And that is that both main characters do something that is technically against the rules in both their governments, but in this very small act of rebellion, they believe that they're actually doing something to fight back against their government. But what they don't realize is that it is a very calculated and acceptable form of rebellion. For Katniss, she believes that she's sticking it to the man because she's hunting. Although it's technically not allowed, Katniss is able to go out in the woods, even cross the fence that is supposed to be electrified, and, get food and money for her family. This is technically an act of rebellion. She's doing something that is explicitly against the rules of the Capitol. And just going a smidge into the rest of the series, we find out in Catching Fire that the Capitol always knew that she was doing this. And even in the first book, the peacekeepers and the mayor knows that she is doing this, but she's never punished for it. And in the first book, we think that it's just no one really cares and everyone just wants something to eat. So who's really gonna blink an eye if she's breaking the rules to get this food? But in Catching Fire, we find out that President Snow always knew she was doing this, but they just allowed her that little extra bit of freedom to kind of keep her subjugated so that she wouldn't do anything beyond that. And it's the same thing in Battle Royale. As I mentioned previously, Shuya is very much into rock music, which for some reason is not allowed in Greater East Asia. But Shuya listens to it frequently. He is playing rock music on the guitar, and he believes that this is his form of rebellion against the government. There's an instance where Shuya says that he thinks everyone in the country should listen to rock music, and that maybe, if they did, it would push them to rebel. It would push them to question the government. But Shogo puts it into perspective by saying that he's never really had a problem acquiring this music. Even though it's restricted by the government, he's never had any repercussions for playing the music or listening to it. And what Shuya realizes is that this is a very calculated form of rebellion. The government is giving him this small bit of leeway to give him the illusion that Shuya has more freedom than he actually does. Because if he accepts this small form of rebellion, he won't go beyond that. Arguably, it's a really small detail in both books, but it was really interesting and I really liked it, so that's why I brought it up, but it is a similarity. Back to the more, we'll say, minor similarities, we have that the main character experiences hearing loss as a result of an explosion. Again, this is really specific, but in the Hunger Games, Katniss experiences hearing loss after she blows up the food supply of the career pack. It's not really stressed in the movies, but it's a very pivotal point in the book. And in Battle Royale, it is, again, very just minor. With that grenade incident that that I mentioned earlier, the attacker in that scene also throws a second one and it blows up really close to Shuya, giving him a slight hearing loss that eventually goes away as the book progresses. Another similarity being that the antagonist of both books has a body shield. They have body armor. In The Hunger Games, our antagonist is Cato, and at the very end of the book, we find out that he has kind of like a body armor shield, something that prevents Katniss's arrows from hitting him. And in Battle Royale, our antagonist is Kazuho Kiriyama. Kazuho eventually gets a bulletproof vest. Granted, he takes it from one of the other participants that he kills off. So even further similarities being that the antagonist is wearing this body armor in their final battle scene. This one's pretty minor, but I just thought I'd bring it up. In both books, they use bird calls to signal to their allies. In The Hunger Games, that's with Rue's song to signal the Mockingjays, the little 4-whistle note that I won't be doing because I can't whistle. And in Battle Royale, Shogo has a bird call, something that he can literally blow into, that they use in the event that any of them get separated so they can find their way back to the group. So those were all the similarities, everything that I could possibly think of after reading these books side by side. Anything that sounded remotely similar between these books, I have on this list. But now I go into the differences where I add a little bit more nuance and context so you can see why I think that these books are actually different. First, we have the perspectives. In The Hunger Games, the book is told exclusively from Katniss's point of view. It's in first person. We don't get to see any thoughts or emotions from any of the other characters. But in Battle Royale, it's told from a third person perspective. Our main characters are of course Shuya, Nariko, and Shogo, but we do bounce around to the other students in the class. We get into their minds, we get their backstories, their emotions, their internal thoughts. So we get more of a holistic view of why everyone is or is not participating in the games. Oh yeah, that's another difference. There are people in Battle Royale that are actively choosing not to participate. In Battle Royale, there are groups of students that are actively trying to escape the island. They think they have a chance. In The Hunger Games, there's no question you aren't leaving. You either fight or you die. Another huge, and I mean huge, difference between these two books is that the games in Battle Royale are not televised at all. The fact that the Hunger Games are televised to every single citizen of Panem is so crucial to the plot. The whole point is so that they can show every single person just how much power the capital has. That they can forcibly take your kids, pluck them from your arms, drop them into this arena, and you are forced to watch them die. That mechanic is crucial to how the capital maintains power. In Battle Royale, the only thing they will televise is who won, and they will only do it to whatever prefecture that is participating in the games. Everything about the games is intentionally kept very secret from the general public. Another huge difference is that the participants in the experiment in Battle Royale don't know that they're participating until they literally wake up on the island. In the Hunger Games, you have the whole reaping ceremony. You know what day it's happening, you know your name's gonna be in there, you know how many times your name's gonna be in there, and to some extent, you know your chances. In Battle Royale, they know that this experiment goes on. They know that once they hit their third year, that there is a possibility that they will get picked, but they don't know when it's gonna happen. They don't know when they will be chosen, if they were chosen. They don't even know what island they're on until they're there. And again, the reaping ceremony is so crucial to the Hunger Games. You cannot take away that ceremony and still have the same book. It's crucial again to the way that the capital maintains power because it further shows the divide that they have within their own districts. When Peeta's name is called during the reaping, it's noted that he has siblings. He has people that would want him to live, and yet none of his family members volunteer in his place. Further pushing this message that the capital manufactures, that you cannot even rely on your own family members. So this whole selection process is very critical and I would argue a pillar of the Hunger Games, and it is not in Battle Royale. Another critical difference is that all the participants in Battle Royale know each other. And this isn't like, oh yeah, I've seen you around. They are in the same class. Arguably, they have probably spent most of their academic careers alongside each other. Our antagonist, Kazuo, even has people that are distantly related to him in this class. Whereas in the Hunger Games, the fact that you don't know intimately any of the other tributes other than your pair from your district is crucial. It again perpetuates this division between them. They don't know anything about the other districts. They don't know anything about the other people that they're going to be fighting. And that's entirely by design, so that you can't humanize the other people that you're with. The tributes are then forced to believe that they can only rely on themselves because they are the only human. Everyone else is just out to get them. These are savages that will kill me given the opportunity. Now in Battle Royale, the fact that they all know each other is also to their disadvantage. What Battle Royale really focuses on is this component of fear. These students have all known each other for a relatively long time. They are casual, they're friendly, whatever. They've seen how they act with others. But in this experiment, they're forced to question these relationships. Because hey, maybe this person offered me a pencil when I forgot mine, but does that necessarily mean that they're a good person? Does that mean that they wouldn't turn against me given the opportunity? The fact that they know each other forces them to question their relationships, question the trust that they have in each other, and really determine if whatever that trust is based on is actually enough to consider them an ally. What we see over and over throughout the book, and what makes it so devastating to read, is you'll see like two students get into a conflict with each other. One will end up killing the other, and then you realize through their perspectives that neither of them really had any intention of hurting each other. They were just both afraid. They thought, this person will kill me if I don't kill them first, so I have to strike. And that's what makes it so devastating. But in the Hunger Games, it's entirely different. Katniss is surprised over and over again when people spare her. When Thresh decides not to kill her to settle a debt that he has with her because of Rue, she is entirely surprised. This is unprecedented for the Hunger Games, but it's entirely focal in Battle Royale. Another big difference between these books is that every participant in Battle Royale starts out with a weapon and supplies. When they leave the classroom to go out into the island, they are given a day pack where they have bread, water, and a randomized weapon. But in the Hunger Games, you of course have the cornucopia where everyone starts facing it and it's filled to the brim with weapons, food, anything you could possibly need to survive, but there's no guarantee you'll actually get something. You have to make that choice. Otherwise, you have to be solely reliant on your own skills. And speaking of weapons, one other really huge difference between these books, and what I would argue really solidifies that these are not the same book, is the fact that in Battle Royale, a lot of the weapons are guns. When you pay attention to the kind of weapons that are in the Hunger Games, they're all weapons that require some kind of close range. We don't see anyone pull out a Glock in the arena in the Hunger Games, and that is by design because the whole purpose is the theatrics, the spectacle, putting on a show. If you take the perspective of the game makers, they might say something like a gun is too immediate, it's too quick, and it doesn't feed into that spectacle. Whereas forcing the tributes to basically engage in hand-to-hand combat, it's more entertaining in a very morbid, grotesque way. The only long-range weapons you could argue are in the Hunger Games are spears and Katniss's bow. But in Battle Royale, our antagonist, Kazuo, has a machine gun. Like, that is so entirely unfair for him to have. Like, who's gonna survive that? I would argue that the reason that they have those kinds of weapons in Battle Royale is because, again, they're not focused on putting on a show. It's not about the entertainment. It's just putting them into an arena for an experiment. They don't care how it happens as long as it happens. But in the Hunger Games, everything is methodical. It's by design, and that's why we don't see those kinds of weapons there. And as I mentioned earlier, another big difference is that in Battle Royale, there can be no winner. They are okay just killing off everyone. But the fact that they need a winner of the Hunger Games is entirely crucial to the plot. It's the reason that everything happens in the book, in the series, because they need their victor. And that's how Katniss was able to get away with keeping herself and PETA alive. As for our main characters, I think they're also just like morally very different. By the end of the book, Shuya is entirely convinced in his mission to rebel and take down the government. Katniss never wanted a rebellion. She never wanted a war. All she wanted was to make it back home. Everything that Katniss did that looked like an act of rebellion was just her acting on her own morals. It was all about showing her humanity. And that is what sparked the initial rebellion, by showing the other districts that just caring about each other and being unified is resistance. And the biggest difference of them all, what everyone has been waiting for me to get to the point of in this entire video: what is the purpose of the games in both of these books? Well, the purpose of the Hunger Games is something that is explored a little bit more in depth in the prequel, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. In this first book, we get the general idea of why the games are taking place. And that is to curb rebellion. The reason that they host these games every single year is to remind the districts that they are entirely powerless against the might of the capital. The Hunger Games are a cost, a necessary evil to ensure that they have their peace times. And now, when you do a general read of Battle Royale, and if you look up on Google, it will tell you is that the experiment takes place for similar reasons, to curb rebellion. And although you can say that it does prevent rebellion in some ways, I don't think that's the entire story. What I think is the main purpose of these games is more about complacency. There is a point in the book where Shuya talks about the various times that he's seen the results of the games. The moments when he would see the victor come out bloodied and entirely a shell of who they used to be. He would feel angry on behalf of the student, on behalf of all the people that died unnecessarily. He would feel discontent with the government and feel almost moved to do something about it. But then that feeling would fade. Eventually, he would forget about it and just move on with the rest of his life. And it is this point in the book that I want to focus on when talking about the purpose of the experiment in Battle Royale. Now, you can say that the experiment is in some way to prevent rebellion because, as we find out throughout the book, all the students in the game have some kind of connection to rebellions, whether that being their parents have spoken against the government, some kind of relative, something they did. That universal rebellious attitude is found in most of the characters. So you could argue that that's why their class was chosen and it wasn't random. But there's a conversation that Shuya has with Shogo that really opens his eyes to what their government is all about. In this dystopian world, despite the fact that their government is a dictatorship, the Republic of Greater East Asia is thriving. They are leading the world in progress, and the quality of life is, for the most part, good. Shogo explains that the country is essentially going through an industrial boom. So for all intents and purposes, when you look at the country as a whole, things are going okay. And what people in Greater East Asia universally agree upon about the experiment is that it's a necessary evil. Because above all, they fear imperialism. They fear the progress of the United States. They fear not staying on top. And the government has told them that this experiment will help strengthen our country, strengthen our military, and it is necessary to the progress of Greater East Asia. The systematic and unnecessary deaths of 41 15-year-olds every single year is just an occupational hazard. And because it's not televised, and because they don't know anything about who gets picked and why, it's mostly outside of the public eye. It's not something that is front and center or something that they really worry about. It's a tragic loss, but one that needs to happen. And Shogo even says that the reason that the experiment is successful and the reason why no one speaks out about it is because of the citizens and their behavior. He explains that the people of Greater East Asia are very collectivist. They are not individualistic like they are in Western countries. And because of this, they have a lot of country pride. So they won't rebel against the government and they won't speak out against the cruelty of the games, because it is not, as Shogo says, in their nature, and also because people really accept that it's just a cost for their quality of life, that there is so much good that exists in their country that this is just an ugly stain that no one pays attention to. It is just a necessary evil to keep the machine running. And that is exactly what this book is warning us against. So I think the purpose of the games in both of these books is very different, although they do share some similarities. They have messages that go hand in hand, but are entirely their own. Overall, I think we shouldn't pit two queens against each other. Both of these books are phenomenal. I loved reading both of these. Although there are some similarities between these two books, I do wholeheartedly believe that they could not be more different. The settings, the purpose, the meaning, everything is just used so uniquely in these two books. Honestly, after examining Red Queen and Powerless, those similarities are so much closer than anything in the Hunger Games and Battle Royale. I think most of the similarities are in, again, that battle format, but if you take that away and you only look at the other similarities, it's really like passing. Yes, the love interest gets injured in the leg specifically. The country's 75 years old. You have two protagonists that survive at the end of the book against all odds, but it's really minor when you take into account the entire book. Some of the similarities that I outlined in my other video were so close, literally word for word copies of each other, the same plot points, the same story beats, and it could not be more different in these two books. And granted, maybe the movies are shot similarly or have similar scenes, and maybe that's why Quentin Tarantino said it was a ripoff, but when you look at the original source material, I wholeheartedly believe that these are different. And I think both of these books individually have their own merits, and when you read them, you can really feel the soul and the passion that went into both of these books. When I read Powerless and Red Queen, Powerless felt so empty and devoid of substance. I cannot imagine how anyone liked it. I'm so sorry. These books, I understand wholeheartedly why they have such like cult followings. I get it. They're so good. I don't think we should pit these two queens against each other. Like, do they both have similar messages of being anti-totalitarian and kind of like a cautionary tale to the viewer? Yeah, but I think they tell that message in very different ways. I cannot properly express how much I loved both of these books. They are just like such masterpieces, and I honestly want to reread Battle Royale. I want to reread it. I want to watch the movie. I can't get enough of this. I'm probably going to watch other like analysis videos after filming this one. I just didn't want to be influenced, so I didn't watch them beforehand. I'm gonna watch them now. I truly just can't get enough. It was so good, and I'm heartbroken that we are pitting these two books against each other because they're so good, and we don't need to do that. You know, I think there's a world where these books can coexist without the allegations that one copied the other. But anyway, that was my opinion. Those are all my similarities and differences. Let me know down in the comments if you agree, disagree, whatever you think. I want to know. Let me know if you've read Battle Royale or The Hunger Games. This was my first time reading Battle Royale, and I loved every single second of it. This is an easy 5-star book. I think arguably this might be my favorite book of 2025. It's definitely in the running, and we're only in February. Let me know if you want like a reaction. Maybe I'll compare the movies side by side. Maybe Quentin had something to say about the movies, and maybe that's why he thought it was a ripoff. But I swear to God, if I watch those both movies and I don't see like a frame by frame exact copy between the two, I don't know what he's talking about. These books are entirely different, and that is wholeheartedly my opinion, but I do think my opinion is right. I don't think these books are in any way kind of similar. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, because that would be really upsetting to me if you watch this whole video and you watch all my videos every week and you don't subscribe to me. If there are any other books that you've heard about that people are saying are copies of each other, let me know. I love doing these like side-by-side comparisons. It's actually really fun for me. It's a little confusing when I literally go like chapter for chapter, but otherwise I really enjoy doing it. So if there's any other books that you know about, let me know down in the comments below. Be sure to follow me on all my social media at Listen to Kristen on Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. I am no longer on Twitter. I like Blue Sky a lot more. First of all, when you open the app at night, it gives you like little stars and it's really cute. Anyway, that's the end of my video. I've been talking for, I want to say like 2 hours. Let me look. Yeah, 2 hours. That's an egregiously long time to talk. But you know what? I didn't even say all that I wanted to. I honestly might make independent videos of these two books because there's just so much to unpack and talk about. And I only went into like the bare minimum for this video, I'm being very reserved in my 2-hour recording time. Let's see if I get ripped apart on the internet first for saying that these books are not the same. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Time to go have my weekly Chipotle bowl. Thank you.